Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle and this is a reading roundup. In this reading roundup, and in all my reading roundups, I just talk about some of the books that I've been reading recently. Now, I've had some books that I had to take back to the library because they were horribly overdue. So I'm going to insert those clips in here. So you will see past Janelle doing some book reviews, and then I will come back and talk about these 5 books that I have left to talk about. Happy Saturday afternoon. It is rainy and dreary outside and we are getting more days of rain in the forecast. So I thought this is the perfect time to pop on here and tell you about the 2 books that I've read most recently. I need to take them back to the library. I have some tea in this fantastic mug that my sister-in-law sent to me. Open a book and open your mind. The other thing that I love about this book is that that's written on both sides. So it works for a left-handed person because quite often if I get a mug with something written on it, I don't get to read it with the way I hold it. So that's perfect. So I've got a little bit of berry herbal tea there. For this afternoon. So I read the 3rd book in the Eddie Flynn series by Steve Cavanagh. This is The Liar. And this book, this one was good. It's not my favorite of the 3, although I still really enjoyed it. It was a little bit different than the other 2. The other 2 had this time factor of 48 hours to accomplish something. And so this still had he still had pressure on him in this one, but the time factor wasn't there. And so the story was a little bit different, which was actually good. I think it's good that the author doesn't get too, too heavily into a very formulaic style for his books. So in this one, Eddie gets a call in the middle of the night from Leonard Howell. Leonard Howell is ex-Marine, ex-police officer, and he now runs like a hostage negotiation firm or something like that. Like it's all about ransoms. And his daughter, who is 17, has been kidnapped. And he needs Eddie to come over because he needs a lawyer, but he also needs Eddie's skills. Eddie and Leonard have known each other for years. Leonard is very aware of Eddie's past, and that's one of the reasons why he needs him to come and help him. They don't know who to trust. The FBI have gotten involved, and like with all other Steve Cavanagh books, it is action-packed, fast-paced, very twisty-turny. Like with the other ones, I was surprised by where the story went, what happened in a good way, in a way that I really enjoyed. So yeah, this is just a solid series that I have been loving. So if you've never read the Eddie Flynn series, check it out. This is the one that is the book that is the most popular, that gets talked about a lot on BookTube, is 13, which is, I believe, the next one. But a lot of people who read that book don't realize that it's part of a series. And you're missing out if you don't also read the other books in the series. Very, very enjoyable. And then I also read The Woman on the Orient Express by Lindsay, Jayne, Ashford. Now, this one is a large print copy. That's all I could get from the library. But I'm glad that I read this book. So this is just historical fiction. And the main character is Agatha Christie, which is what attracted me to this story. And it's called The Woman on the Orient Express, even though her journey on the Orient Express only takes up the first small portion of this book. But it was really good. Now, this came out in 2017, I believe. Yeah. And so it came out earlier, but I've just read The Mystery of Mrs. Christie. And I forget who wrote that one. And that one is about what happened during the days that she disappeared in 1926. So both books address true events from the life of Agatha Christie. This book takes place 2 years later when she goes on a trip by herself to Baghdad. And so both books addressed true events in her life, but I liked this book better because I liked how Agatha Christie was portrayed better in this book. So this book, she's still dealing with the events that happened, the aftermath. She's just, you know, she's now divorced from her husband, from Archie, and she's found out that he's getting remarried, that he is marrying the man that he divorced her, not the man, he is marrying the woman that he divorced her for. And so she just figures getting away from all of it is the best option. Her daughter Rosamund, who is 8, I think, is at boarding school. And so she decides to take a trip on the Orient Express and to end up in Baghdad. She's hoping to visit some archaeological sites while she's there. And it's about 2 women that she meets on that train. She meets Nancy and she meets Katharine, who are both hiding their own secrets, who have their own issues to deal with. And it's the story of those 3 women, how their lives intersect, how they affect each other. And it was just a really good story. It was really well written. I really enjoyed the descriptions of Baghdad and when she goes out to the archaeological digs there in Mesopotamia. You can see where she gets some of her material from books that get published a few years later. So yeah, I enjoyed the writing style. I enjoyed the portrayal of Agatha Christie. In this book, she meets Max Mallowan, who becomes her second husband in real life. And I really enjoyed how he was portrayed in this book too. He was a great, great character. So yeah, I just really, really enjoyed this book. It was a good, solid historical fiction. It wasn't a mystery. It was just historical fiction, but just really nice. A really good story about these 3 women and the secrets they're holding and the things they're going through. And having it set in Baghdad and the Middle East was great. There was great descriptions of that. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I think this is a book that I'm going to look forward to pick up for myself for my own library, because I would like to read it again. So those are the 2 books that I've read most recently, and I will see you again with the next couple as I finish them. So I have 4 books to talk to you about, and then 3 of them I need to take back to the library. So I read The Firebird by Susanna Kearsley. I did this as a buddy read with Carolyn from Carolyn's Reading Ramblings. We had read The Winter Sea earlier this year and quite enjoyed it, and this is the sequel or the follow-up to that book, which is great because we find out what happened to Anna in this book. And I have to say, as much as I loved The Winter Sea, I liked this one even more. This is about Nicola, who works in an antique shop, and she's born with a gift. She has she's like a psychic almost, or she's got like ESP. When she touches an object, she can see images of what happened to the person who owned that object. And someone comes into the store with a wooden carving for sale, and claiming that it had belonged to Russia's Empress Katharine. And when Nicola touches it, she sees a scene involving the Empress. And so anyway, she ends up going over to Russia for her job, and she tries to look into it and find out more about this wooden carving, which is called the Firebird. And then we also go back in time, and because the other person in that scene that she saw was someone called Anna, and we learn more about Anna, who we met first in The Winter Sea. And so again, there's these dual timelines in the great way that Susanna Kearsley writes them. I really enjoy how she does that in her books. And I really liked the story of Anna and what happened to her and how she ended up in Russia. I just really loved it. And I normally see stuff coming. I figure it out, but there was a reveal in this book that I did not see coming, and it was sweet. It was so good. So I gave this 5 stars. I loved it. It was so good. And then I also tried a new historical mystery series. This is Poppy Redfern and the Midnight Murders by Tessa Arlen. This is a historical mystery that takes place during World War II, and our main character is Poppy Redfern, and she is trained to be the ARP warden for her village. She goes to London to get trained to do that. And so basically it's her job to patrol the village and make sure that everybody has their blackout done properly and all of that. And she kind of arranges for, to ensure that everyone has a shelter to go to if there's ever an air raid, and all of that. And so she goes back to her village to do that job, and two girls that she knows end up being murdered. And there seems to be a connection to the American Air Base, which is very close to the village, and they're new there, and so the village, of course, wants to blame the American soldier or the American pilots at the base. So yeah, it was pretty good. It was a good, solid historical mystery. I like World War II. Poppy was a good character. So yeah, it was quite good, and I would read the next in the series for sure. So yeah. And then this is also Becca's Fault from Hicks Picks books. A lot of the books that she reads are ones that I'm interested in, so I'm always writing down her recommendations. And in one of her recent videos, she talked about a book called Whatever Happened to Pudding Pops, and it was a book about the 70s and 80s that she had read, and it sounded really good because I was a child of the 80s, but my library did not have that book. My library had this one, The Totally Sweet 90s. From clear cola to Furby and grunge to whatever, the toys, tastes, and trends that defined a decade, by Gael, Fashingbauer, Cooper, and Brian Bellmont. Now, this book was awesome. This book was so totally a trip down memory lane, because I graduated high school in the 90s, I graduated college in the 90s, and I got married in the 90s. So the 90s was a big decade for me, and there was so much in here that I remembered, that I forgot about. It was really, really fun. And as you can see, I tabbed it up. There's some things that I want to share with you because it was so good. And one thing that I noticed as I read this is that these people researched really, really well, but I'm also gonna bet that the 90s was a big decade for them too, because they make lots of connections that maybe don't get made unless you experienced it yourself in the 90s. So let's just dive right in, and I will show you some of the things that I tabbed. So the first one was Adam Sandler songs on Saturday Night Live. 100%. I totally remember Adam Sandler songs from Saturday Night Live. America's Funniest Home Videos. I didn't realize that that wasn't until the 90s. It kicked off in 1989, but essentially it was a show of the 90s. And I remember watching it. Yeah, America's Funniest Home Videos. Oh man, this is what we did before YouTube, okay? And then also they mentioned Baywatch. I didn't really watch Baywatch, but it was such a huge part of the culture that people were, talking about David Hasselhoff and cracking jokes and all of that. So, I mean, I totally remember, yeah, Baywatch. All right, let's see, what else do we have here? Oh, yes, Beanie Babies. Now, I didn't collect a huge amount of Beanie Babies, but I did have the parrot one, and I loved it. And I would put it on my desk whenever I had to write an exam in high school or in college. I had this parrot Beanie Baby that would sit on the desk and stare at me as I wrote exams. It was awesome. Okay, then we also have, oh yes, 90210, Beverly Hills 90210. See, if you didn't live in the 90s, you may not know what I'm talking about, but I didn't actually watch that show a huge amount either, but again, it was such a huge part of the culture of what was happening in the 90s that you knew a lot about it, even if you never actually watched much of the show. They talk about cassette tapes, and oh my goodness, yes, cassette tapes. Because if you had like a dual, if you had a box with a dual cassette tape, then you could make mixtapes yourself, which I did a lot. I would record songs off the radio on to cassette tapes, and they also talked about how we got to be so expert at using a pencil to wind back the ribbon of cassette tapes. Yeah, memory lane, right? The song Closing Time by Semisonic, huge, massive. Yeah, I remember that too. Dawson's Creek, another show that I didn't really watch, but I mean, they mentioned the song and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. And I just knew who the actors were who played in it, and yeah. Okay, fanny packs. Now this is funny because I didn't realize that fanny packs were so much of the 90s. I would have said 80s myself, but I do remember the fad of fanny packs. And I'll admit I had one. I did. I had a fanny pack. Fargo, big movie of the 90s. Father of the Bride, also a big movie of the 90s. Floppy disks. They talked about floppy disks. Now this was hilarious. So in case you don't know what a floppy disk is, there's a picture of it. 3.5 inch floppy disks. Now you're gonna laugh at this because we could fit 1.44 megabytes onto a floppy disk. Now this was a big deal because in college I would write my papers on my word processor, save it to the floppy disk, and take it to the computer lab and print it off. So floppy disks were huge. Forrest Gump, huge movie of the 90s. Friends, yeah, Friends. That's all I'm gonna say about that. The Got Milk ad campaign. Oh my goodness, that was huge. Got Milk? Oh yeah. Groundhog Day was another huge movie of the 90s. Grunge. Hypercolor shirts. I had a hypercolor shirt. Totally. It's heat sensitive clothing so that when you touch it somewhere it changes color. Which honestly is ridiculous, but oh yeah, everybody had them. I had them. I'm gonna be 500 miles by the Proclaimers. Huge song. And it sounds like they didn't like it so much in this book, but I still love that song. I love that song. The Titanic. Okay, and specifically the I'm the King of the World part of the Titanic. Oh yeah, everybody did that. Everybody did that. Inline skates. I had a pair of inline skates. And this is when I lived in BC. I'm surprised I didn't kill myself on my inline skates. All right. The movie Kindergarten Cop with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Oh my goodness. Or how about The Lion King? The Lion King, right? Yeah. All right, let's see. Milli Vanilli and the scandal that came out of Milli Vanilli. Oh yeah, for sure. Let's see, let's do a few more. Oh, pop-up videos. So these were music videos, and then text would pop up that would give you information about the band or how they made the video or something. That was super cool for a while. Also, Pretty Woman. Okay, so Julia Roberts, Richard Gere, right? So, I mean, Pretty Woman. Crazy movie. But this was awesome. So they have like, they'll talk about the thing, and then they have a status of whether or not it's still available. And then they also have a fun fact. Now listen to this fun fact. Jason Alexander, Seinfeld's George Costanza, co-starred as a creep lawyer. Apparently, the jerk store called and they were running out of him. Isn't that awesome? That's totally what I mean when I said that they researched well or that they had to have lived it, because frankly, that line from the show is hilarious. The jerk store called. Oh my goodness. Oh yeah. So and I love that they made that connection. That's so good. Scrunchies. I was the queen of scrunchies. And Seinfeld. Right? I loved Seinfeld. Seinfeld was my absolute favorite show. I just think it is hilarious. Now, here's a funny story for you about Seinfeld. So the finale of Seinfeld came out in 1998, and it aired while I was on honeymoon. Now, Aaron and I got married in Edmonton, in Alberta, and we had to move to Ontario, which is, it's only 2 provinces over, but it was like about a 24-hour drive or more to get there. It was a long drive. And so we decided we had to go to Ontario for his internship. And so we decided that the drive, we would take it slow, and the drive between Alberta and Ontario would be our honeymoon. Well, we knew that Seinfeld, the series finale was happening during our honeymoon. And so we timed it. We pulled into this little town that we weren't intending to stop at because we were otherwise we were gonna miss it. So we found a hotel, we checked in really fast and ran to the room. So we just made it in time to watch the finale of Seinfeld. So yeah, big fan. Let's see, just a couple more here. Troll dolls. I didn't really have troll dolls, but they were huge. Wayne's World. Oh yeah. Windows 95. Windows 95 was huge. I totally remember that. And then of course, the Y2K panic. I don't think, unless you lived through it, you could really realize how seriously we took it. We were sure that the world was going to end at the year 2000 because the people who had created computers hadn't really accounted for the crossover between 1999 and to 2000, and that somehow that was going to like basically blow up the world. And of course nothing happened, but it was a massive panic, and I remember it. So yes, the totally sweet 90s, really fun jaunt down memory lane. And then finally I read The Body in the Garden by Katharine Schellman. This is a book that I heard about through Kate at Kate Howe, and it is a Regency era historical mystery, which is awesome. And this one was really good. I quite enjoyed it. Our main character is Lily Adler. She's newly widowed and she's gone to live in London to try and pick up the pieces and figure out what she wants to do with her life. And she's at a ball at her good friend's house and is out in the garden and overhears an argument between 2 men, and then she hears a gunshot and she runs back to the house, and later on they discover that someone has been shot in the garden. And she gets herself involved because her good friend's husband, Lord Walter, bribes the police not to investigate, which she finds, you know, a little bit suspect. So yeah, it was good. There was great characters in here. It was a good mystery, and I liked how it resolved. And so I would totally read more from this author. I hope there's more to come in this series. All right, and that's it for this time. Okay, I finally finished Wives and Daughters. This has been a long time coming because I started this book in Victober of 2020. But to be fair, I started reading it, I got a good ways into it, like 283 pages, and then I just put it down, and for no other reason than just other things caught my interest. I was really enjoying it, but yeah, so then other things just caught my interest, I put it down, and then I was motivated to pick it up again in May because Kate Howe was doing a reading challenge with, oh, I've forgotten his name. I'll put his channel name in here. And so I thought I would read along with them, that it would be a good motivation to get it done. And it was. I love this book. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was phenomenal. I love Elizabeth Gaskell's writing style. This is a classic. Maybe I should mention what it's about. So it's a huge book. It's the last book that she ever wrote, and it's unfinished. Although it's so close to the end that you really know kind of what is going to happen at the end. It is still unfortunate that it's unfinished. But this is the story of Molly Gibson, who is the daughter of a doctor in their village in England. And she lost her mother when she was very, very young. And when the book opens, I think she's 16 maybe. And her father decides that he needs to remarry because Molly needs a mother to introduce her to society and all of that. And so he remarries, and the woman he remarries, Hyacinth, has a daughter herself called Cynthia. And so it's just about that blending of families and what that's like. And it's about Molly's relationship with her father and people that she meets. So there's the people in the big house, and there's the Squire's family at Hamley Hall. And it's just, I love it. I love her writing style. I love that it's readable. I mean, this is Victorian literature, but I found it very, very easy to read. I really liked it. It has great characters. The character of Molly is fantastic. Her stepmom, Hyacinth, is something else. She is quite the character, and she's awesome. Cynthia's an interesting character. She's deep and but also selfish and vain and maybe a bit surface, so she's really complicated. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this, and I'm so glad that I finally finished it. And then I read Death of a Cad by M.C. Beaton. I'm rereading the Hamish Macbeth books that I have. This is part of my personal reading challenge that I talked about on my channel update video. And so this was just a really quick read. It's just barely over 200 pages. It's the second book in the Hamish Macbeth series. So this is just a fun, cozy mystery set in the Highlands of Scotland. Hamish Macbeth is the village constable, and I like him. He's a great character, and these are just fun, light, cozy reads. I also read for that same reading challenge the first book in this historical mystery series called The Poisoned Garden. This is an Elizabeth I mystery by Karen Harper. I've been collecting this series for quite a while and only just recently found the last book. So I am now rereading this series. It has been more than 10 years since I read this the first time, and I had completely forgotten the story, but I really, really enjoy it. So the main character is Elizabeth, but in this book she is still Princess Elizabeth, or Lady Elizabeth, because her sister Queen Mary has exiled her, kind of. So she's living between Hever Castle and Hatfield House, and she has a minder, essentially, what's his name? Thomas Pope. The Popes, Mr. and Mrs. Pope, are there basically to take care of her, but they're there to watch her and make sure she doesn't, get involved in any funny business of, trying to take the throne from her sister, Queen Mary. And so in this first one, she receives a letter. So she is still able, she's got some loyal people in the household, and she is able to receive correspondence secretly. And she receives a letter that has an earring in it that is the pair to one that she had from before. And this letter reveals that her aunt, Margaret Boleyn, I think, who she had thought was dead, is still alive, and so her mother's sister. And so she is desperate to go and see her. It sounds like she's dying, and so Elizabeth contrives to sneak out of the house and go to visit this woman. Her son is Henry Carew. I can't say his name very well. Anyway, but he is just recently home from overseas. He's been exiled overseas as well, and but he decided he better come home and see his mother before she passes away. And on his way to the house, he and his servant are ambushed. His servant is killed. There is poisoned arrows are shot at them, and he is injured but not killed, and he is saved by Edward Topside, who is part of a group of players who were traveling on the road. And anyway, so when Elizabeth gets there to visit her aunt, Henry's there and recovering, and she decides she needs to look into what's happening, because it wasn't just, robbers, things that the thieves said indicated that they were going after all Boleyns. And so Elizabeth gets involved to try and stop this poisoner and this plot. And it was really, really good. I really enjoyed it, and I am really looking forward to continuing on in this series. And then I read my first book for the Golden Girls Readathon. This is The Curse of the Pharaohs by Elizabeth Peters. It's the second in her Amelia Peabody series, so this is another historical mystery. And I read this for the common challenge of reading a book published or set in the 80s or 90s, and this was published in the 80s, 1981. It's the second in the Amelia Peabody series, which I adore. I love this series. The characters are just great. I love the writing style. It's very lighthearted and humorous. I love Amelia and her husband Emerson, and their relationship is so funny. And in this book, they have been they've been wilting away in England for like 4 years since their last trip to Egypt. They're kind of settled in. They have a house. They've got a son now, Ramses, who is hilarious. And they're both missing the excitement. They're missing the archaeology. And then they find out, they've been reading in the papers, that Lord Baskerville, who was in Egypt on a dig, had died in somewhat curious circumstances, and the newspapers were blowing it all up and calling it the Curse of the Pharaohs. And then Lady Baskerville arrives to ask Emerson to come and take over the dig and finish what her husband started. And so the two of them get to go back to Egypt, and it was great. I really, really enjoyed it. And then finally, I read Murder at the Grand Raj Palace by Vaseem Khan. This is the third in the series, maybe the fourth. It's the fourth in the series, the Inspector Chopra series. So this is set in modern day Mumbai, and I loved it. I love this series. I love Inspector Chopra. He is a private detective, a private investigator. He runs a detective agency out of the restaurant that he also runs. He runs a restaurant that's not just for cops, but it's primarily used by police officers. And so he has an elephant that he was gifted, a baby elephant who always plays a huge part in the stories. And in this one, he gets asked by an old friend on the police force to investigate. There was a death of an American billionaire who was found dead in his room at the Grand Raj Hotel, which is a 5-star hotel, and they had hosted an art auction, and this billionaire had bought this piece of art. It was a huge deal, and then he was found dead in his room, and the police are pretty eager to call it suicide and just close the case down, but the investigator on the case thinks there's more to it, but his hands are tied, and so he asks Inspector Chopra to look into it. And so this is all set, the hotel is in South Mumbai, so it's quite a drive for him to go. And meanwhile, his wife Poppy is very excited and stressed out about their upcoming 25th wedding anniversary, and she feels like he is not spending enough time worrying about what they're gonna do. And so she's not happy that he has taken this case, and so she decides to go to the Grand Raj Hotel, and she gets a suite there, and she figures if he's going to be spending all his time here, then I'm going to stay here as well, and I might get a chance to see him a little bit. And so she brings Ganesh with her, the baby elephant, and also their adopted boy, Irfan, as well. And so that part is hugely entertaining of what they get up to in the hotel. And what I loved in this story too is that Poppy got her own investigation. So there is a royal wedding that's about to take place in the hotel, but the bride disappears, and under very mysterious circumstances. She was taking a bath in the bathroom, it was locked, all the windows were locked, and she disappeared from this locked room. And so Poppy gets her own investigation, and I loved it. I love this series. If you've never given a shot, you should try it. And they're they're very entertaining, well written, good mysteries with great characters. So that's what I've been reading recently. Have you read any of these books? I would love to chat with you about them in the comment section down below, and I will see you for another video soon. Bye.